Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to go over what the rest of the term is going to be. So if you'd watch up here for a minute, I do have the PowerPoint in PDF form up here. I have your note packet in docs and PDF form up here, and the extra credit submission place for your vocabulary here. First up, today we are going to go through several different things about bones, and then when we get to the end, you're actually going to do some research down here. You're going to turn that all in as notes and assignment in one thing right here. We'll do several different things coming up. We've got the ACT coming up, and after that, you'll notice down here on the 9th, which is a Monday, this is where you're going to pull together from the evidence lockers things that you need for your crime scene. Remember, we're doing it in pairs. So we're going to have 5 groups of 2. So just 2 in a group, no more than 2 in a group. Okay, you're going to set up a crime scene. You're going to give me your crime scene background information. That's like we normally would have done. Okay, but there's some different things, so make sure you look at the rubrics. You'll get one more day after that Monday as a prep day. That day I have to go down to Slick. So this day right here is your fine-tune everything, get everything done for your crime scene, blah, blah, blah. Then on Friday you come, you set up your crime scene, and then you have to be able to set it up in 15 minutes. I am giving you a grade for that setup. So if it's not set up and it's not complete within that 15 minutes, your grade's going to go down. So look at that rubric. Then you're going to process, initial processing the scene. I am going to grade you on that. So make sure you look at the rubric so you know what I'm going to be grading you on. Then on that Tuesday, you'll get a day to do all your analysis, do your PowerPoint, get everything ready to roll. And then that Thursday is your crime scene presentation. There we go. And you're going to present it like you were in a courtroom, so you need to dress professionally. And that's the end of the term. So we've got just this last unit that we're going to be talking about. Your crime scene does have to include a blood spatter and everything that we have done so far. So you need to make sure you're talking. That's why I gave you 2 days to try and figure out what you're doing. You only do get 1 day to process it though. Okay? So you want to take good pictures. All right, so let's go back up to today. There's a lot of things going on today. So we are starting into bones and guts. Okay, which is forensic anthropology, and everybody's bones are a little bit different. So, first thing we're going to do is what role does the anthropologist play in solving crimes? Whoops. Let's see if it comes up. Here we go. Come on. It really does not want to play nice right now.
What role do anthropologists play in solving crime? Let's ask our expert.
Actually, let's stop real quick. The other thing I wanted to point out is, if you look at your notes real quick, there's a lot of things that we've got to learn this time, okay? You'll see that we're going to be learning, reviewing our superior, anterior, posterior, all that. But we also go into the dorsal cavity, ventral cavity, we do body regions, we do organs, and we do bones, all in this one unit. And then how they're used in anthropology. Okay, so we are right here. You're wanting to be right here in your notes so that you can grab the answers from this video.
Situation where remains are found and there's no known identity to the individual, the anthropologist would be called in to use their expertise in dealing with the human skeletal anatomy and with human variation in order to study the remains, such as studying the skull, and to build a biological profile of the individual. The profile is then given to the police as critical evidence, and they can then continue on with their investigation, knowing who the set of remains actually represents. I was hired as a contractor for the RCMP, and there was a large-scale investigation going on. What they needed was a number of people who were highly qualified in being able to distinguish human remains from non-human remains. Similar to what anthropologists would do at a mass disaster scene. A physical anthropologist has expertise in dealing not only with recent remains, but dealing with historic remains. And often it's the most important thing is to determine the recency of the remains and how they fit in with the general context of a crime scene. In determining who the person was, you want to know the sex of the person, the age of the person, the general stature of the person, and you want to know their biological ancestry. The skull is the most diagnostic area for building a biological profile of the human skeleton. So when you look at the skull, the first thing that you want to do is determine the sex of the person. And in doing that, there are certain telltale features that you want to look at. First of all, there are the brow ridges. Normally on males, they tend to be much more robust than on women. And then at the rear of the skull, you have this protuberance, or this bun, occipital bun, that comes out of the back of the skull. And typically in males, it's much more robust as well, because it serves as a muscle attachment for muscles of the jaw. The cranial sutures, the older the person gets, they begin to fuse together very tightly. And so that gives you a good indication based on the extent of the fusion, the actual age of the individual. The teeth, you can tell whether the individual is adult or not by the eruption of the third molars. DNA is actually preserved much better in teeth than in bones. And from bones, DNA is a difficult thing. It's something that we would only normally try to extract if we were dealing with ancient remains. When you're dealing with the forensic context, you hope for other types of evidence like soft tissue, skin, muscle, or hair, of course, which are much more useful for DNA analysis.
What role do anthropologists
Okay, so forensic anthropologists analyze skeletal remains to determine the identity of a victim, as well as his or her life history, cause of death, or other clues about the crime. He talked about the brow region, that there's other places that we can look to figure out if it's a female, how big they are, what's going on there. So if you look here in the pelvic region, on males, it looks more like a Pac-Man. It's very small openings here and here, very pointed region. On the females, it looks like more like a Mickey Mouse, with the big ears rounded. It's not as pointed as the males. So that's in the pelvic region how we can tell if it's a female or male. If you look at what we was calling this bun, it's a lot different in a male than it is in a female. And also the brow region, you can see on a female it's almost non-existent, but in the males you can see a brow region, and this area is the cheekbone is much more pronounced. In men, if we look at the femur, the head of the femur here is usually larger than 51 millimeters. In women, it's 45 millimeters or less. Okay, so that's a big tell right there. And then when you go to the humerus on females is only 305.9 millimeters, while in males is 339 millimeters. So there's a big difference there. And we could go into the condyles and how the shape here, the condyles are different, but the big three that they want you to know well for are the brow, the skull, so the pelvic, skull, femur, and humerus. And with a skull, it comes with the bun and the brow. Okay, does anybody need me to read those numbers again? For the femur is 51 for guys, greater than 51 for guys, and less than 45 for women. And then for the humerus, it's females have a maximum length of 305.9, while males are 339.9, and those are millimeters on both of those. Are we okay to move forward? Anybody need?
Average, like, could you have a longer one in a female? And would it
You could. These are things, but they look at all of this together.
Okay.
So if I see this in a female or in a skeleton, I'm guessing it's a female. Okay, the chances are it's a female. The males, like I said, have a much pointed, and it's more like a Pac-Man. It's very, if you did a circle here, it would look like a Pac-Man if you cut this part off. Where the females, you can't really see that. It's more of a Mickey Mouse shape, Mickey Mouse pancake. Okay. All right. So the other thing that we need to worry about, and this is really important, he talked about this, was the sutures on your head. You need to put these dates down. This helps us to know how old people are when they die. So we look at teeth for the young, but once they hit about 20, we look to the skull. So the 20 to 30 on the second molar, and this point here fuses about 20 to 22. And then we say, okay, if this part back here, the very back of the skull is fused, then they're between 30 and 40. And then we can look at a couple other places on, you can see, that are 40 to 50. So depending on how much of that is fused, we can say, okay, they're between 40 and 50. Then we go to the mid part of the skull, and mid part of the front of the skull, and mid part of the back, and that's 50 to 60. And then 60 to 70 right here. And this last part right here only fuses after 80.
So how would they like, I get like the ages, but how would they like, I'm not understanding how they would like find that, you know what I mean? Like if they saw a school, like.
We'll see a video here in just a minute, and you'll understand. So just get down the information.
What did you
And
want us to write about the ages of when they use the teeth?
So the teeth is usually 20 and under, and the skull they use above 20. Okay, did everybody get all those dates down on your skull?
Do we need to write down all the teeth?
Yeah, all the teeth and the dates.
Not quite there.
So write down all the teeth and all the dates on the skull. Give you a few more minutes with that.
Do we have to memorize these?
You'll need to know them.
I didn't get 2, 3, and 4. Were those from the video?
Yes. So what 4 things do we want to know about a skeleton?
Sex, age, stature, and ancestry.
Yep.
What did you say that last one was?
Ancestry. Okay, going forward. We can determine race by a lot of things on the skull. The opening of the eye, the orbits is what they call it. If they're more rectangular, then it's probably an African. If they're more circular, it's Asian. If you look at European, they actually look like aviator glasses where they're flat on top and then have the little underneath. You can sort of see right here it goes crossed flat and then has this circle. So they call that the aviator. You can also look at the what they call the bun of the skull here. This one is an African American. You can sort of see the bun of the skull here. And this one is Asian. And this one is European. So you can see that the Asian is more rounded. the African American has sort of more of a slope here, and on the European we've got the rounded, but then it has a flat back right here. These are the females on the top. The bottom are the males. Notice that the bun on the male is a little bit different. The cheekbone and brow bones are a little bit different also. Okay. Looking at it forward, you can see the different shapes of the eye socket and the nose area. These help us to determine like this is a more Asian, where it's circular. This is more of an aviator, German. This one is more square, which would be more like the African American. And then you've got in between, this one has more of a teardrop into the center. And they found this one in the Solomon Islands in the Pacific. So a lot of different ways that we test and ancestry. Come on.
Do they also look at the jaw as well?
They do. Bring it up on YouTube. It seems to work better.
My name is Angie Christensen. I'm a forensic anthropologist at the FBI laboratory, and my work entails primarily examining human skeletal remains to help identify the person and also help determine how and when they may have died. A typical workday for me involves largely casework. By examining a person's skeletal remains, I can often estimate if they were male or female, how old they were when they died, their ancestral background, as well as their height. I also examine for signs of skeletal trauma, including gunshot wounds, blunt force trauma, and sharp force or cut trauma. On this x-ray, I can see that this person has a frontal sinus cavity present on their cranium, and if I had another one, I could use that to make a positive identification. These cranial pieces appear to be from a relatively young individual since they've separated along the natural suture lines, which we can refit back together. To be a good forensic anthropologist, first you have to have the stomach for dealing with skeletonized remains and occasionally partially fleshed remains. You also have to be a very critical thinker and be somebody who's interested in putting together pieces and solving puzzles. Most anthropologists have a very diverse background in both the social and hard sciences. If you're considering a career in forensic anthropology, I would recommend taking a wide variety of science classes and possibly some field work in archaeology if it's available. When I'm not at work, my favorite pastime is rock climbing. I'm somebody who likes to be constantly challenged, which makes this a great line of work for me and rock climbing a great hobby because in both cases I'm always thinking there's always some new challenge facing me.
Okay, so going forward, it just sort of gave you some career connection here.
Did we get to
Not yet, not yet. Okay, so reading the remains on the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. I'm hoping this comes up. We'll answer more of your questions here.
Meet the Smithsonian's bone detectives.
It's phenomenal what can be learned from the human skeleton.
Solving mysteries from human bones.
We can really put together who they were and how they lived and how they died.
From historic excavations to current criminal investigations.
Law enforcement comes to us to assist in body location and recovery, and then to establish identification and cause of death.
It's not a field for just anyone. It has a lot of harshness to it.
This is a human story that we're trying to unravel. These are real people who lived and died, and we feel an obligation to tell their story.
How do the forensic anthropologists unlock the clues hidden in bone?
Can you come in and look at this one right here?
They combine extensive training in skeletal anatomy and keen powers of observation with the high-tech tools of modern science.
The technology today affords us incredible opportunities to analyze bone in different ways.
For the Written in Bone exhibit, they're applying this cutting-edge technology to the Smithsonian's collection of some 30,000 human skeletons and yielding amazing new insights.
Our ability to read the skeleton gets better and better.
The CT scan's X-raying power allows the anthropologists to visualize internal bone structure, They can detect changes that result from disease or trauma.
We're looking it over for any types of infections, any types of injuries, fractures that occurred in life.
X-ray and CT imaging are crucial first steps in the analysis of the bones.
The bone is basically very, very weak.
The mass spectrometer helps the anthropologists test for chemicals such as heavy metals in bones.
If they're being treated with certain types of medicines, like mercury, for instance, or arsenic, we can pick that up in terms of their bone chemistry.
This is the mass spectrometer, and what this machine can do is tell us what trace elements make up the bones.
Detection of trace elements can provide key insight into a person's living environment, health, diet, even cause of death.
This one sample has over 700,000 counts of lead. This individual has ingested a lot more lead over their lifetime than the rest of the population.
The scanning electron microscope magnifies up to 200,000 times, making a tiny specimen like this mosquito look like a giant T-Rex. Anthropologists can use the microscope to explore the minute details on bone.
What you're seeing here in this image is actually a very small surface of this central incisor. The scanning electron microscope is allowing us so much more visualization of teeth and bone than ever before possible.
Advances in DNA technology have had a tremendous impact on forensic anthropology.
It allows us to take samples of bone and establish positive identification of some of these old remains.
Working with skeletal DNA, anthropologists can help identify individuals previously lost to history.
When you're talking about bones that are 400 years old, it's totally amazing.
Armed with these high-tech tools, the Smithsonian's bone detectives read the remains and decode the stories locked in human bone.
Okay, so going forward here, they can actually see where a bone has been mended, where a bone has been mended here, where they've got a healed fracture that was not set here, a gunshot wound through the front of the head and how it exits, and damage by a hammer. If they have bone marrow that has not dried up, they're able to get DNA samples from the bone, teeth, and hair. They just need to have moist samples that have not dried up. Yes?
How long does it, like, the skeleton last without, like, drying completely of bone marrow so that they can't get it? Like, how long does that take?
It just depends on the climate. We'll see some things here in just a minute that will explain that. But and if the bone is broken, then the inside bone marrow gets out a lot faster. So you can see they've got different sites, different burial techniques here. Sometimes they actually would take the person apart basically and bury him like this. The ribs are actually encased here, and these are the femur and lovely things there, so it makes it more like a basket.
That's pretty cool.
Okay. When they're looking for dead people, there's several different ways they can go about looking for them, because as a person decomposes, it gives off methane gas, and so they can have a computer-generated probe like we've got in the back that actually tests for methane gas around different things. They look for ground depression, and we're going to watch this little video here on what actually they can do. Let's see if I can get it up in another thing. It doesn't want to come up there. Now it's finally going. There we go. It's thinking about it, maybe.
Horizon Credit Union
I'm
is
sorry,
all about
have
you.
To watch this. It doesn't let
We
me
welcome
get out
everyone, and we work hard to be your financial partner.
Loan decisions are made locally, so your money starts here and it stays here. We give you the experience and convenience that you deserve.
Like online banking and great rates.
When you're looking for a financial solution, stay local. Come join Horizon Credit Union.
Visit one of 5 locations in Davis County. Horizon Credit Union. Big enough to compete, small enough to care.
Hey, I think I should go there.
Yeah, no.
Since 2000, police have searched the area several times.
We employed dogs to help the canine search. We employed the FBI using ground-penetrating radar, some magnetic resonance in order to try and determine any anomalies in the ground that might show us where a burial site may be. And we came up empty-handed.
Doug's task was to find what's called disturbed soil, topsoil and subsoil mixed together, which is one indication of a burial site. The most effective technology for this kind of search was clearly low-tech.
These are probes. These are stainless steel rods. They've got a slightly expanded pointed tip. What we're going to do is we're going to push it down into the soil and feel how far it goes. Undisturbed soil will go a certain depth, and disturbed soil should go further. So we're looking for something that has a different type of resistance, a different feel to it in terms of the ground there. See, that's undisturbed soil right there. It's going down. It's hard stuff, whatever's been dumped in here. It goes down about 6 inches. Areas that are a little softer, the probe goes in a little deeper. We'll mark them now. And that way we'll keep track of them. And we'll come back to them. We'll check them out. What we're doing is trying to just read the soil. And one of the things you can see here, she's just got a very, very subtle little swale, kind of a little dip. For some reason, the soil's softer here. That's an area we got to check out.
Next, they investigated the flagged areas with coring tools. They look very much like the probes, but with hollow centers, the coring tools can extract 15-inch cross-sections of soil to determine if there was any disturbance.
That's nothing. That's sterile. That's sterile all the way down. There's nothing else in it.
By afternoon, Doug's team had pinpointed several sites to investigate further. The police then brought in a bobcat with a backhoe.
So what tools are they using?
But hope soon turned to disappointment.
Any reason to pursue this any further?
Brush.
So I think we're finished here.
At sundown, the search came to a halt. Even with the expertise of Doug Owsley and his forensic team, there was no trace of Chiquita Bell's body.
Okay, so they were looking for ground that had been disturbed. If you look at regular ground and do a core sample of regular ground, it usually is in layers. Okay, when soil has been disturbed, you don't get any layers. Like he was showing with that one core sample, it looked the same all the way through. Usually you'll have layers. And so he was saying this has been disturbed, something's gone on here. Your turn to do a little bit of research. That's why I had you get your computers up. You're going to go to anthropology, meet the Smithsonian's blood detectives, or bone detectives, and let's see if I can bring it up. I hot linked it from your canvas so you didn't have to put that big long thing in. Didn't want to go there. There we go. You're going to do a little research. So on another piece of paper or off to the side here on probably be better on another piece of paper. I want you to write down what you find out when you go to the site. It's called the Department of Anthropology, National History Museum. There's a whole bunch of things that you can look at right here for the research. And there's some things down here at the bottom where you can search the collections. You can look at written in bones. There's several other things going on. I want you to spend the next few minutes in class. This is your assignment for today. And write down what you find out, what things you think are cool, okay? And then when you are done, and make sure you do a good job of it, that's the end of today. So you'll upload, so draw a line across, because I was making these really fast and I didn't split the days. So where it says bones, right above that, draw a line across, says end of day 1 and then beginning of day 2. And then you're going to upload it. So take some time. You've got a good 35 minutes that you can play and look in that area, and I really want you to research what is available there. Okay? All right, time is yours. And you should be able to go right back to your it went on the wrong side. Right here, down here at the bottom, meet the Smithsonian bone. So it hot links you right there. Everything comes into this one assignment, the notes and the assignment I just gave you. Okay?
Instead of like a book assignment, it's
This for today. So it's your notes one, FA1.
Okay.
Notes and assignment. Yes. Can you what?
What was number 5?
What kind of tools are required to retrieve a body? You've got to have shovels, trowels, brushes. They usually have some kind of plastic or tarp to put the stuff on. And oftentimes they have screens, so they can put the dirt on the screen and make sure they're not missing any part.
I was kind of under the impression that like anthropologists deal with clean, kind of naked bones.
No.
Do they have to clean them off?
Yeah. My daughter's actually an anthropologist, and I'm trying to get her to come and talk to you. She actually went to Park City, and when they were putting in that new interchange between Heber and Park City, they had to move 3 graves, pioneer graves, and there were still skin and hair and.
So how would they get that off? Do they just
boil it?
Decompose. Shipwrecks, if you go down, if someone will still have their
She said it was a little airy because back then they used to have glass that they would put the pitch. They were worried about burying people alive, so they put glass, and the glass had imprinted the face of that person because it had collapsed. The wood had collapsed on them. So I'll let her talk to you about it. And she can. Yep. So that if they woke up and they were buried, they could pull on the bell. And a lot of times it would still ring in the churchyard because as a person decomposes, rigor mortis sets in, and it rings. So yeah.
You're like visiting